Good evening, morning, afternoon, whatever time it may be when you are listening to this video. Welcome, classmates from BBA 340. Appreciate your time here today. We are going to discuss Google Data Center Efficiency Best Practices, and this will be presented by the ECHO team that consists of Michaela Ballard, Brooke Henderson, Lindsay Moreto, and myself, Logan Platchek, who will be DJing the event today. Moving into a quick overview / agenda of what we'll be discussing. We'll start off with an overview of data centers today, how they're really affecting the environment per se, and ultimately moving that into Google, how they have really been a leader in the industry from a standpoint of making the best practices to reduce some of the carbon emissions, etc. We will also dive into another huge best practice, Collusion, the cloud service that has really made a huge launch in the IT industry today, and then we will dive into kind of what we think from a legal and ethical recommendation, how these data centers should be regulated, and the kind of actions that they should take place. And then we will wrap it up with the conclusion of the best tips moving forward. Okay, as for a quick overview, as technology keeps advancing, devices are becoming smaller and smaller, which requires additional labor, additional power in order to create these devices, right? So more power is needed to actually manufacture those devices, and then also to keep charge to those units. You know, if I take a look at my house, I probably have 20 items plugged in at any given time. That obviously is wasting energy. Now, in this case, we're talking about data centers, but to kind of paint the picture there. What is carbon emissions? Carbon footprint is really defined as the total emissions caused by individual event, organization, or product expressed as carbon dioxide equivalent. So if you've guessed it, yes, carbon emissions and carbon footprint is bad for the environment, and we need to make the right actions in order to reduce those, okay? A lot of the experts, especially from our textbook, they believe that by 2020, our carbon emissions are expected to match or exceed the airline industry. Now, if you think of big airplanes, that's kind of a crazy thing to think about, that the IT industry will be in that space just because of the data center usage from a power perspective. Federal agencies have also been cracked on in regards to the Data Center Optimization Initiative Committee instructed them to reduce the cost of data centers by 25% by 2018. That initiative was brought out to those federal agencies in 2016. Okay, so by the end of the year, they need to make sure that they reduce the overall cost by 25%. Non-computing overhead continues to be an issue from a power perspective, and then just to kind of define that, is a non-computing overhead are really devices that are cooling, in the sense of a fan and power conversions. And a lot of companies are actually using almost as much power in this non-computing overhead as they're using to power their servers. Okay, so a few things. These are a lot of the issues, and we'll dive in here to the best practices. And these are all really by Google. Okay, so number one, build and operate data centers in cooler climates. And the reason for that is because if we have a cool climate where essentially the data center is cooling itself down, well, we don't need to invest and buy in large fans that take up a lot of power distribution. Iceland would be a great example of a cool environment where we can set up these data centers. Also, hydropower, which is the energy of moving water. Using this does not contribute to carbon emissions whatsoever. Some of these Scandinavian countries have adopted this method and really taking off from that standpoint. Another great solution is in renewable energy. which is the energy from a source that is not depleted when used. Okay, so for example, power and wind from solar farms, that type of energy, it's not being depleted. We're actually using the force of the wind and the solar farms to actually produce the power from that standpoint. Google has really taken grasp of this methodology, and in 2016 they purchased 44% of their energy with renewable energy. They took it a step further in 2017 and were 100% dependent on renewable energy to power their data centers and offices. Continuing here, power usage effectiveness, otherwise known as PUE, from a technical standpoint, is defined as the ratio of total amount of energy used by a computer data center facility to energy delivered to computing equipment. So from my perspective, that sounds very technical for me, so I really had to dumb it down in a sense. And in layman's terms, it's really analyzing how efficiently a computer data center uses energies, okay? And I like to make this comparison to a golf swing. If I go out to the golf range and I hit 20 balls and everyone is going to the right, I don't really know what I'm doing wrong. I can feel in a sense, but unless I'm actually recording that in the sense of a video to go back to look at, and then now I can correct my swing to make sure I'm hitting it on plane and delivering it straight. Right, so same thing from a power usage effectiveness. If I don't know the issue here, where's all my power going, then how am I supposed to fix the solution? So this is something that's been a huge adoption in the industry, and it's really all around in the data center perspective. Another big push is removing any unnecessary parts or components to servers or racks. And from a perspective of video cards, a lot of these little video cards are installed in servers and racks, and they have their own little fan on it. So if we can remove those out, again, reducing some of that energy, reducing those fans, which really leads into the next point here, which is ensuring that we're optimizing the fan power, and instead of a large powerful fan in the server that is cooling it, we only need to invest in fans that are barely keeping it cool enough to use. So maybe it's not on a higher spin functionality rate. Instead, it's on a more lower sustained spinning of that fan to ensure that that device is staying cool. Okay, another big push is thermostat control. I know that, speaking of experience, when several years ago when I would go to a data center, if I was walking the floor, it would be 60 degrees. Now they realize they don't need the temperature to be 60 degrees, and now they're keeping it around 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Another huge initiative, and this has really taken over a lot of the technology space over the past several years, is the cloud. What is the cloud? It's information and data stored on physical or virtual servers. So basically, a large enterprise company, instead of having their own data center at their own brick and mortar offices, etc., they're actually outsourcing it to companies like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and several other companies that have all their own data centers that are top of the line. They have all the newest technology, so all their data is stored at their secured facilities that they're outsourcing instead of in their own brick and mortar. Okay, according to our textbook, companies spent $175 million on cloud infrastructure in 2014, which was 20% over the previous year, outsourcing data center services. It is the fastest growing form of computing today. And it's said if all U.S. office workers switch to the cloud, or were to switch to the cloud, they could reduce energy used by IT by up to 87%. And Lawrence Berkeley National Lab were the ones that published that data. And then also, if you think about the cost savings that the company can have from this perspective, is they don't have to go to their own data center and remove racks. and update all the equipment on a quarterly or monthly basis, so they don't have to invest in the labor from that standpoint or the power, because they're outsourcing it to another data center who is very well equipped. They have the latest technology and ultimately can reduce downtime and focus on some of the other tasks like driving new sales, driving business, increasing your revenue and your profits. Now, based on a lot of this information that we learned, our Echo team really came up with a few recommendations that we would say. However, it's only as good as really the law, okay? So we would need the law to really enforce all data centers to adopt same regulations for preventing carbon emissions, and really to leverage Google's best practices as a standard. And the last slide here will really show you their 5 top core principles of what they recommend. So we absolutely recommend that as well. Google's done a great job. It shows with their statistics how they've been able to purchase all their energy from renewable energy, so that's great. If we can have the other data centers to adopt a similar approach, we would be in a really good position. Also, audit data centers quarterly. This brings control, brings structure to all data centers, and to ensure that everyone is going green in a sense. According to a video released by Google Green, Google was able to cut energy usage in half, reduce cost and carbon footprint from a lot of their best practices. And really finishing up here are Google's top 5 core principles for data center efficiency. Measure PUE, okay? Remember the example of the golf swing. If I'm not watching my golf swing and know what I'm doing wrong on poor shots, well, I'm not going to be able to fix it, right? Same thing here with energy. We need to ensure that we are properly watching the results of the energy, measuring where the energy is going, how it's being used, and then so we can equate that to some of these other things like managing airflow. A popular tactic over the past several years are to have hot and cold aisles where the front of one cabinet never faces the back of another. So essentially it's every other. You have a hot aisle and then you have a cold aisle, and keep going on in that data center. Again, back to adjusting the thermostat. It's recommended at 80 degrees, and also utilize free coolant, which this is using low external air temperatures to assist in chilling water, which can be used for industrial processes or air conditioning systems. Really beneficial in cool areas. So the example of data centers in Iceland, always great because it's cold in Iceland. Okay? And then last but not least is to optimize your power distribution. This means upgrading your UPS devices or uninterruptible power supplies and power distribution. Some of the old UPSs and PDUs, they are really obsolete at this standpoint, and they take up a lot of energy. And some of the newer devices don't take as much. And then also eliminate servers that are not being used. There are tons of data centers across really the U.S. and probably the world where they have servers that are running, taking up power, and they're actually not even on the environment and not even being used in an effective manner. And ultimately, the main goal here is that from the data center space, we really need to go green, reduce those carbon monoxides, those carbon dioxides in the environment, and we strongly feel that Google is making the best push and able to complete that task at hand. Lastly, thank you very much for joining. Appreciate your time, and have a good rest of your day.